Today with me on Home Care Hindsight, I'm joined by Julio Briones, CEO of the Briones Group Consulting. Julio, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, David. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're super excited for this. We've known each other for a while, but
hmm
for people who don't know you and aren't familiar with your work, how would you introduce yourself?
All right, so I'm Julio Briones, and so I've been in home care off and on since I was 15, and at the time of this recording, I am 47 years old. So I live, breathe, and just exist home care. It's I've had other job changes, career changes along the way. I very proudly served my country in the Army for a number of years. And, I dabbled in retail clothing and other things. And I take these perspectives of everything and I help agency owners understand and develop strategies to grow their business. That's me in a nutshell. I'm a husband, father of two kids, two young kids, one adult child. And other than that, I'm just the fat guy sitting on the screen right now.
I love it. Well, one thing that we talked about and that I found really interesting is you have put into practice something that was just a hypothesis in my brain, which is one of the most high impact, untapped pieces of the talent pool in this country is stay-at-home moms
hmm
whose kids have gone to school and who are looking for something to do that feels meaningful, that's a good use of their time now that they've gone, through a pretty significant change in their life. So talk a little bit about that in your business.
Oh, well, the inspiration for doing all of that is my own wife. She's been a stay-at-home mom. When she and I first got married, we have a 25, about to be 26-year-old daughter, and now we have an 8 and a 5-year-old. So we have this huge gap in the middle. So I've got to experience this, and during the time, when kids start going back to school, they're in pre-K or they're in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. You have a lot of really talented, very talented women out there. They're sometimes highly educated that are just dying to get back to work, but they don't want to give up being a mom yet. So what ends up happening? When they want to go back into the workforce, either the schedule doesn't work for them, because they need to be somewhere 9 to 5, and the kids go to school from like 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning until 2 or 3, and all of these things happen. What I've done is I've figured out a way to hire single moms that are talented and have an understanding of home care and everything that I've needed. And I've created hybrid environments for them. It's like, hey, come to the office. Let's do the heavy lifting, between like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning after you dropped your kid off till about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Go pick up your kid. Go be a mom. Go do what you need to do. And then let's see what other stuff, how we can manage to work around your availability for simpler tasks. And I've actually coached a couple of my clients in the home care space to do this with their office staff. Like, let's be realistic. You can have a part-time scheduler that is fantastic there during those hours, 8 a.m. till about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And why don't you solve your own biggest issue? On call. The stay-at-home mom doesn't have to be in the office after 2 o'clock. Make sure you have your full-time scheduler there, and now you got a part-time scheduler to cover, and you have somebody that can do on-call, and it's a relative and it's a safe salary to, you're not overspending, you're not underutilizing your resources. And if you have somebody that's really looking for that type of work, it works out great because now they get the flexibility that lets them live their life and you get your needs met as a business owner.
I love it. And as people who know me know, I get tired of small talk after a brief period of time. And so I always just want to ask people, hey, what kind of person are you? And you're not allowed to do that in most settings, but this is my podcast. And so I think I can. And so, Julio, to ask you the question, what kind of person are you? I want to start with what is your go to karaoke song?
Karaoke is a big part of who I am. I actually love it. It embarrasses the hell out of my wife, when I do this. And when, our oldest daughter was a teenager, it used to embarrass her too. But Bohemian Rhapsody, I absolutely love it. I think it's such a fun song. That's one of the things. If you ever find me in a karaoke bar or in a party and there's an opportunity, you know, there we go. Followed by a close second of Johnny Cash, Ring of Fire.
I have a couple of follow-up questions.
Okay.
Number one, what are you doing during the guitar solo of Bohemian Rhapsody?
Oh, I'm playing air guitar all day. Don't even worry about that.
And then what is the karaoke song that somebody starts and it just makes you die inside because you hate it?
Oh, there isn't one. I think karaoke is so much fun. Yeah, it doesn't even matter. If I'm not enjoying the song, I'm at least enjoying the fact that somebody's got the nerve to get up there and make an utter fool out of themselves.
You're a better person than I am. Sweet Caroline does it for me
Oh,
every
really?
time. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
I belt that
yeah,
out in the car every day.
I love it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Julio, I brought you here because you are a well-respected, well-established thought leader in the space. People tune into what you have to say. You've accomplished a lot of good things in your career. But on this show, we don't talk about that. We're going to talk instead about the big mistake that you've made. I think we learn a lot from our mistakes. I make mistakes very frequently, and it makes me feel better to know that the people who come on my show, though they've accomplished a lot, have also done dumb, short-sighted things that had significant impacts in their lives, but that we all learn from it and grow as a result of that. So,
hmm
Julio, thank you first of all for coming on to talk about that. What is your big mistake?
Well, it's actually twofold. We talked a little bit about this on our pre-show, and the more I started thinking about it to get ready, it's kind of a simple mistake that turned into this giant monster of a mistake for me. All right, so back when I first started doing consulting, I kind of fell into it. Okay, that's I got to give a little backstory to this. So I fell backwards into consulting. I was working for a home care agency, and they were a budding franchise at the time. They only had like one or two franchisees, and they were just kind of testing the water to see where they were going to go. The organization shall remain nameless, but you know, I'm sure it's not hard for those of you that know me to figure it out. And they were my first consulting client. Okay. They were in a situation where they wanted me to keep doing sales and client services for the home care agency, but they also wanted me to start working on development of strategy for the franchisees and all this other stuff. And the service agreement I gave them, because I wasn't as savvy, and I was like, well, I know enough, I can cut some corners. I didn't give them a solid service agreement, okay? And by not doing that, by trying to cut a few corners and saving, $500-600 instead of going to an attorney, this is something that I ended up shooting myself in the foot. And fast forward a few years later, shortly before they sold to a VC company, here I am, no longer working with the home care side of it because they sold that, and then, there it was a big situation where they just didn't need the consulting service anymore. I'm trying to walk away to establish my own company, and I had no protections for my intellectual property, and I had put all my eggs in one basket with just one big client because it was giving me enough to live. So this is where what I was saying. It's one mistake that turned into two, because I relied so heavily on having the one client on that one vertical of service. And it's something that I actually pass along now to my own clients. Always be sure to have your documents regularly reviewed and make sure that you're in compliance. And on the other side of this, make sure, especially if you're in private pay, that's because the bulk of my clients are private pay or looking to get into private pay. Always, always, always make sure that you have enough verticals to sustain your business. If you're in an area where live-in care just doesn't really work that great, or because you don't understand necessarily how to do live-in care, invest the time and resources to learn about it. If you're seeing that you have a 4-hour minimum and you're getting a lot of calls for people to just want those 1 hour or 2 hour shower visits, figure out how to establish a wellness program, so that they'll pay more, but they'll have these shorter visits. Diversify your offerings so you can expand your client base, and always, always, always have your documents reviewed to make sure that you're all right and that the client's protected, but more importantly, your business.
Yeah, I think that's all good stuff. I want to kind of go back in time here though to what was the moment that you realized that this mistake was impacting your life in a significant kind of way?
So it happened while I was in the midst of working with this company. Again, remember, you got to keep in mind, I was an independent contractor, that was consulting the individual franchisees. So because I thought I was covered with all of this stuff, I went to pick up some extra clients because I figured, okay, let me expand out a little bit here. And I started doing these events, at like chambers of commerce and things like this, just some stuff to try to drum up business. And one of the franchisees actually got upset and went and made a complaint to the franchise that, hey, here I am trying to get clients and I should only be helping them. And that's when, lawyers got involved and all this other stuff. And that's when I realized, that, hey, maybe I should have had my stuff reviewed a little bit better because I didn't include in there that my stuff is not proprietary for them, that it's my stuff. It was a very, very expensive lesson learned on my part. Very expensive.
I remember the first house we bought was from built in the 1920s, and I was changing a light fixture, and it had been rewired at some point in time by just a guy. And I look in the ceiling, and there's just this giant bundle of black wires. And I called a friend of mine who is a contractor, and he said, "You know what you're doing right now?" I said, "What?" He said, "You're learning, and learning's always expensive."
Yes, yes, that is very true. The best lessons that we learn in life and what creates true wisdom are usually the most painful and most expensive for us to learn.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So on this show, we would make new mistakes, and that was a new mistake to make. I'm guessing you've made some changes in your life to prevent that from happening in the future.
Yes, yes. After investing a few hundred hours into rewriting every shred of everything that I've done and investing heavily in making sure all my stuff is checked out by a lawyer every 2 years, just yeah, it's not something that easily happens. I love working with franchises, and small franchisors, just because it's great. It's great for them, great for me. Everybody wins. But this time my contracts are, they are assured that I'm either using the franchise's materials and none of mine, or the franchise understands that, hey, if you guys are going to work with me, your stuff is your stuff. I won't take anything from that, but my stuff is mine, and you can't claim it as your own down the road.
I would guess, the 2024 version of what you're describing is there's probably a lot of folks now who are getting the majority of their documents started, finished, something by some AI
Oh,
tools.
absolutely.
And while I think that those are hugely helpful and can take off a ton of manual time and you're not having to stare at a blank
Hmm.
page anymore, I would guess that the same kind of cautions that you have about have somebody take a look at these, probably a lot of people are at risk because they're
Yes.
using those tools, maybe uncritically.
I actually have a client currently that is going through that. AI is great as long as you understand it's not infallible. At the end of the day, a human created the algorithm that's used for it to generate this stuff for you. And all that AI is doing, it's learning, but it doesn't have true intelligence. It's just machine learning. So right now, I'm dealing with a client, in Northern Maryland that is having this problem. She created a whole bunch of stuff using AI, and well, it's weird because for she used it to get her licensing, and it was approved. But I guess whoever was processing the licensing in the state didn't really take a deep look into what was written, and now she's in a lot of trouble after an audit.
Interesting.
And it's just getting people into trouble. There's verbiage in the documents that just not allowed anymore. Things about the non-compete stuff that's not allowed anymore. The fines if a client hires your caregiver privately, that used to be very popular, used to be allowed. A lot of states it's not allowed anymore, and federally it's you're walking a line. There's for that particular instance, about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, there was four agencies down in southern Texas where the owners were actually charged criminally for having that language in their service agreements because the federal government considered it price fixing. that if everybody's putting these things in now, you can't go work for someone else, and I'm only paying a fixed amount in the market. The other owners, everybody's like, hey, yeah, look, we're just going to control that. That's price fixing because you're fixing the wages, and by controlling the wages, you're controlling the pricing in the market. And so these are things that can get you in a lot of trouble. Just and AI is pumping it out that way because remember, AI hasn't updated itself, ChatGPT, in a couple of years. They only let it loose on the internet a couple of times, and until they improve the way that it replicates itself and that it learns, unless you are a master prompt engineer, please don't just put in there, create me a policy or create me a client sign up form for home care. Like you're going to get in trouble.
So what I'm hearing you say is if you want to avoid the experience that I haven't had in my life of having a knock at my door and getting handed some papers and hearing you've been served, that learn from Julio's experience here.
Yes, that knock on the door by the sheriff scared the crap out of my wife. I know that.
I believe it. It would have been worth $600 to avoid that, huh?
Oh God, yes, yes. That it would have been the best $600 I would have ever spent in my life.
Oh, I love it. Well, Julio, thank you so much for sharing a walk down memory lane of something that was not a great time in your
Yeah,
life. I love this kind of stuff.
yeah.
We're going to transition into a couple of other pieces that we want to talk about. This next segment is called Underrated or Overrated.
Ah,
And I want to give you a minute to talk about something that you see that's overrated within the industry, which is everybody thinks that this is the way it is, and you've got a different perspective. And so, what do you want to talk about that's overrated?
okay, so I'm going to start with a disclaimer on this one. Okay, keep the hate mail to them to a minimum.
Please send all hate mail to podcast@joinava.com.
Yeah. So here's where it goes. All right. Look, everybody's struggling with hiring right now. Okay. This is a big thing. And it's not anything new. It's been going on, for years. Everyone's always complaining about the caregiver shortage. That, in my opinion, is the absolute most overrated topic in the entire home care industry. Let me explain where I get this from. If we're talking about nursing, doctors, that type of healthcare worker shortage, that I will validate more because you're talking about a bigger investment in, education, the amount of debt you have to get into, the training, everything else. That's something else. But I'm talking about caregiver shortage. Now, state by state, it's going to vary. And here's the why. It's like, for example, you have that registry in certain states like Illinois, like California. All right, so there's a slight barrier to entry there, and if you're a smart home care agency owner, you're going to take the time to learn what the caregiver's got to do to get in there, and you're going to make them able to work. You have other states like like New Jersey, New York, that have that certified home health aide. Okay. And that's another barrier to entry. And again, there's some agencies that'll compensate. They'll hire a nurse, they'll do the class, they'll have somebody take the test. Unless you have a state like New Jersey where there's an actual barrier to entry that you have to go, and it usually costs anywhere from $200 to $600 for the training, the fingerprinting and all this other stuff. And then there's that other hassle of having to get hired by an agency before you get the license, but you can't work until you get the license. And states like New Jersey being the exception, most states, it's relatively simple to become a home health aide or a caregiver. Okay, it's relatively simple. So there is no real shortage. And the simplest way I can prove this is go put an ad on Indeed. And again, before anybody listening to this comes and wants to bite my head off, I understand you're not going to hire everybody. It just conduct the experiment. If I put an ad on Indeed for caregivers, how many people am I going to attract? Now, this is where the solution to all of this, I think, comes in. You have to take a look at what are your own policies, what procedures do you have in place, how quickly are you responding back to them, and are you still going with the COVID methods of just setting up a Zoom call, or are you trying to build a real relationship with these caregivers right from the onset? And this is where I think It's such a huge industry. There's so many people making so much money off of pushing this narrative that there's a caregiver shortage when there really isn't. Okay, there's a retention shortage. There's a shortage of agencies that understand how to retain the talent and how to use and leverage the talent they already have to attract new talent. Let me tell you, happy caregivers will bring other caregivers. Okay, if they feel they are being treated fairly, if they feel like they belong, if they feel like they're being valued as a team member, and if they feel like you're giving them work when they need to and they're not just a number, then you're going to attract more caregivers. And you're going to attract quality caregivers. Because here's the thing, and again, I speak of this from many years of experience, having worked in Medicaid, having worked in private pay, having done all sorts of stuff in my life. And the reality is, when you have a caregiver that is truly happy working at an agency, she'll stay even if the agency down the street is paying more. And I know this firsthand because when I first met my wife, she was a caregiver, okay? And she was not making the most amount of money that she could make working as a caregiver, but every time she walked into the agency, they greeted her. They had a way set up that they gave PPE, the gloves, the hand sanitizer, stuff like this. They would give a little care package every week. So if you're working 3 shifts, your care package was enough to cover your 3 shifts. You would come in to pick up your PPE, and what would happen? They would have out a coffee machine, one of the eventually they turned it into one of those Keurig machines. They had snacks out. They understood that some people were running in after picking up their kids, so they always let them take an extra snack for their kid if it was in the they had them with them. The scheduler used to come out personally and speak for 2 to 3 minutes with them and really build a solid relationship. This is where the solution is. Technology is great. Recruitment, all these people talking about how to improve recruitment, that's great. Let's be realistic. We got to get back to fundamentals, and we have to remember that people will build relationships, and those relationships are what's going to build your business. Doesn't matter if it's recruitment, doesn't matter if it's sales, doesn't matter if it's client satisfaction. If you as an agency owner don't understand how to build a relationship, you're going to struggle in wherever it is you're lacking them. Here's a personal pet peeve, drives me nuts. Every time I work with an agency, I try to fix this first. There is a concept in psychology, where we're talking about group behavior. It's called in-group, out-group behavior. Okay, to put it in the simplest terms so that anyone can understand it. Remember back in high school when you had the real popular kids, then you had the guys that smoked pot and hung out in the corner, and you had the nerdy kids. Those were called cliques. Okay, and those are peer associations and cliques. That is in-group, out-group behavior. The athletic, popular kids did not want to deal with the smart kids or with the kids that would smoke pot in the back of the school. So the in-group would be the people inside your social peers, and the out-group would be anyone you wanted to disassociate yourself with. This happens very commonly in home care. You'll hire a new scheduler. That scheduler will attract more caregivers, the caregivers that worked with them at other agencies. Your existing caregivers will be left out. Okay? That is the problem. Oh, no, no, I'm calling Maria because, I love working with her. She always takes my shift. And here comes Janet, who just started working with you, who you're taking a case away from because you're more comfortable with the other person. So if you look at your caregiver base and you were to look at who worked with you over the last 2 years, but hasn't taken a case in the last 4 months, recontact them, survey them, find out, hey, listen, what's going on, and now try to bring them back in. You're more than likely you are walking away from a huge potential of workforce that was alienated by nothing other than failing to mind the shop. And that's what it's not the be all end all. Yes, there are people that don't want to work. Yes, there are people that are not right for the job. But ask yourself, how many are you turning away just from bad practices or failing to understand that there's relationships need to be built? And that is why I think the caregiver shortage is so terribly overrated.
That's good stuff. The more I talk to agency owners, and I probably have, I don't know, 10 or 12 of these conversations a week, one of the things that I've become acutely aware of is that turnover isn't homogenous across the board within an agency. That number that gets thrown around from the benchmarking report of 79.2% is the average turnover in an agency in the year 2023. It's easy to assume, okay, if you've got 100 caregivers, then all 100 of those, you're going to have to replace 79 of that group of 100. But that's not the way it is. The way it is there is a group of core caregivers that are never going to go anywhere. And then there's a rotating cast of characters where turnover is more like 150% or 160%. And you have to rehire that same small group of new transient caregivers over and over again.
So here's a way that you can visualize this for those of you that are listening. What David is explaining is it's a sales principle that if you were to take any mass group of audience and you look at it in almost like a funnel, okay, you can separate everybody into three buckets. Okay, you will have a group of people that will always buy. Those are the core caregivers. Okay, they've bought into your culture, they've bought into your values. They're there. As long as you don't mess up dramatically, you're going to have that core group. Then you're going to have another group that will never buy. No matter what you do, they're what I call the toilet appliers. Okay, meaning they're sitting there on the toilet with their phone in their hand and they're scrolling through Indeed and they're just hitting quick apply. Okay, not necessarily a toilet. If you don't like that analogy, they could be sitting there watching your client sleep. It doesn't matter. They're just always looking for the next opportunity, but they never really go anywhere. All right. And then you have that big group in the middle, and that's the group you're trying to attract. And those are the ones with the high turnover. And those are the ones that if you don't have those relationship building skills, the same ones that you expect your salespeople, your marketers to go out and use to get you clients, if you don't expect your recruiters and your schedulers and your care managers to have that same relationship building skill set, those are the ones that have that 150% turnover. You will hire the same caregiver, three times over the course of a year, depending on what state you're in. Some states they give the flexibility of 6 months, some only 3 months. But this is where you have that churn. And it all comes down to the same thing, that you have to know how to build and maintain these relationships. That's why I love what you guys are doing in particular with Join A, because it creates that ability to kind of put another layer to that relationship building.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the challenge that so many owners face is that when they had 10 clients and 20 caregivers, they could text every single one of those people and maintain a one-to-one relationship. But as they've grown, they've got to find new solutions that scale with them and that don't result in them being reactive, having their hair on fire, solving for call outs and clock ins and all those last minute things that are not why anybody got in this business.
They're not. Like, I think it's a very common mistake, extremely common mistake that agency owners make. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's probably close to about 80 to 90% of all agency owners I've ever met do this. When the client flow slows down, they slow down recruitment. And then all of a sudden it picks back up, and now they're in panic mode to go find caregivers. And this is where it becomes a problem for them. And this is where that artificial shortage comes in. Oh, well, I went from getting 15 to 20 clients a month to now it's a slow time of the year, so I'm only getting maybe one or two clients a week. Okay, great. So let's slow down recruiting. No, I don't want to hear all these calls from the caregivers asking for work and I don't have it for them. The fact is, once you turn on sales, you have to turn on recruiting, and it's not a garden hose, it's a fire hose. It never should stop. You should never stop actively looking for clients. You should never stop actively looking for caregivers. And that means nurturing everything. Nurture those leads for the clients, nurture that caregiver pipeline. And again, I'll probably repeat it another 30 times before we're done. It's about relationships. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's great. All right, moving into our next segment. We talked about a big mistake that you made, and that's great. But what is a little mistake that you see home care owners making all the time? And that if they quit, it'd make their lives or it'd make their business like 10 times better.
Oh, that one's simple. Learn to decide. There's a concept I have called, art of failing quickly. Okay, it's very simple. If I have an employee that is great and they're performing, I'm going to keep them on. If I see over time that this employee is actually bringing down the ship, I'm not, just because I feel bad for them or because I've known them, I'm not going to keep that employee on. Look, there's a couple of points when it comes to that. Number one, it's the sunk cost fallacy. Just because I invested time and effort into an employee doesn't mean I'm obligated to them. At the end of the day, if they wanted to keep their job, they would continue to perform. I know it's not PC, it's not, modern age, but how dare I mention accountability in the workforce? But this is the reality. If you want to keep your job, you will continue to perform. Okay. So that's one example of how it impacts businesses. A lot of agency owners, and this is a little mistake that turns into a big problem over time. I've seen people hold on to bad employees a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they'll hire other people to compensate, reducing their earnings just to compensate for that one bad employee. Okay.
Mm.
So you have to be able to do this. Rip off the Band-Aid, deal with it later. Okay. What ends up happening is, when we have this sunk cost fallacy, we tend to hold on to things for too long. So the whole concept of the art of failing quickly is, if you're constantly measuring what you're doing and you're constantly having your staff be accountable, and I'll give you a real life example of how you do this, okay? But once you have that, it's easier to know where need to be plugged. And if it means getting rid of somebody, if it means hiring more staff, if it means having to get new equipment, whatever it is you got to do, it'll give you the opportunity to do it faster. So here's a practical, real life, example that you can use every day. So if in your agency, most agencies have a big meeting once a week, and then you should have like these little update meetings daily. So during your big weekly meeting, whether you're doing it once a week, twice a week, whatever it is, you should have every member of the staff, you set a goal, and you have them go up to a whiteboard wherever you're holding your meeting and put down what they did for that week. So let's say our goal is to hire, just to stay on the topic of recruitment, we need to hire 5 caregivers a week, just because we're just really busy right now. We're getting flooded with clients. All right, great. So as a recruiter, how many applications came in? How many people were physically called, like on the phone? Did you get on the phone and call? Did you set up the appointment? Did they come in? And you work down the pipeline, and you set these little goals, and you make them say, all right, if my goal was to hire 5 people a week, but we only hired 3, what happened? Now, you know, it's something that's considered mean in by many people by today's standards, but the fact is, you're holding them accountable. And what tends to happen is that, using the power of a little bit of shame, and doing that accountability by self-reporting, that person is either going to feel so embarrassed that they let the team down by not performing the way they're supposed to, that they will either leave on their own because they realize themselves that they're not performing as they need to, or they will step up their game because they don't want to feel embarrassed ever again. Okay, and as long as you have these fluid goals, our growth goal is 10% a month or 20% a month. Great. This is what needs to happen every week for us to hit those numbers. If everybody self reports, you as the owner will have the numbers. It doesn't matter, but you need them so that the entire team knows where we are. And now that internal pressure and everything else that goes along with it, the self shame, the self accountability, the reporting, it drives the team forward in a very effective manner. And you break it, like I said, it's breaking it down, and it's a little bit tough to manage, and I hope I didn't just ramble on too much, but essentially that's what it is. You set up a whiteboard, you put everybody's goals on it, have everybody put in, show last week's numbers, have them put in this week's numbers, and that number should always be moving forward. And if it's not, odds are, at least in my experience of having run this, experiment with my own team and having run it with many other teams over the years, usually you'll only see a poor performance once, maybe twice at the most. And after that, the people just, nobody likes to disappoint people they like working for. So as long as your culture is right, you're properly praising, you're treating people like valuable commodities instead of like a number, they will want to do well for you. And you won't see that little mistake that everybody makes all over, that failing quickly.
Yeah. What are some other, just kind of quickly, some concrete ways that people should look to fail quickly and make quick decisions?
Well, don't second guess yourself. That's the one thing, okay? Once the evidence is in front of you of whatever that decision is you have to make, whether it be, hey, we're going to expand into a new territory, or we need to, change out an employee, or we need to, make another vertical for revenue, whatever that is, go plan it out and set a deadline. September 1st. We have to have everything in place to create this new process, or we abandon it. So that's what it is. If once you set these deadlines and you have all these measurable milestones and objectives, it becomes a lot easier for you to take decisive action. It's all part of strategic planning when it really comes down to. Like if I sit with you and I say, "Hey, David, the business is doing great, but I do think we have a potential to increase revenue by 25%." Okay, great. So now let's break it down. What do we have to do going backwards? And now let's say that means we have to increase, let's say, digital leads from referral partners. Great. We're going to start buying leads from a number of companies that sell them. Okay, so once these leads come in, that means we need to have a conversion rate in order to make it work of, let's say, 20%. So 20% of all leads that come in, we got to convert into intakes, into in-homes. So that means out of those 20% of those, we have to sign 65% as clients. And that would mean how many leads do we need knowing that to come in every month in order for us to grow? This is how we do it. Now, fantastic. So we're going to try this out for 90 days. Every month we're going to measure. And at the end of 90 days, we have to have a hard decision. Do we move forward or do we stop the leads with that particular company? And that is how you overcome that. And those are the biggest actionable steps when it comes to specific project style strategic planning. But when you're talking about people management, it's set those goals. Everybody that's responsible for their individual goals, you make them publicly report. They go and get the numbers themselves, publicly report. Again, people don't like to let down those they like working for.
That's good. Moving into our last couple of segments here, we've spent a lot of time talking about times something went wrong or some of the things that people need to quit doing. But I always like to wrap these things up on a high note. And so what's something that's happened for you in your business lately that you're really excited about?
Well, the one thing that I'm really excited about right now is number one, it's two things actually. Number one, we've set the date for our strategic planning workshop for home care agency owners. That's going to be coming up in end of September. Keep an eye out if it's past September 2024 and you're hearing this. I'm sure you'll find whatever it is I'm working on then. And very recently have added a whole bunch of stuff to our support platform, the Home Care Owners Corner.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Where can people find you? What do you want to plug?
The biggest thing I would actually say to plug right now, you can either find me at thebrionesgroup.com, my business website, but if you want to learn about home care in a completely free way, you can always find our YouTube channel. It's just go to YouTube. It's Home Care Owners Corner. Just at Home Care Owners Corner on YouTube, and will pop right up. And just give us a subscribe, watch some videos, leave some comments. It helps spread the word and gets more people to get some good information about how to run their home care business.
I love it. Well, Julio, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to move to our final segment, which I'm calling Home Care Hot Take.
Okay.
And we're going to do a quick lightning round of some of the kind of burning issues in this industry.
Okay.
So I'm going to start you off on this, and you're going to take it away.
Okay.
So first one, the best thing you can do for retention is?
Talk to your caregivers actively and be proactive about reaching out to them. understand what they like or don't like about the clients. You're not trying to invite them over to your house for dinner, but the more valued they feel, the more you can get ahead of potential problems.
Excellent. Next, the one thing you can do this week to get more clients is.
Oof. Okay. Anyone who's sent you a client from a referral source, send them a handwritten a thank you note. Mail it to the facility that they work in, and just thank you so much for always thinking of us.
And then last, the office role hardest to hire for is.
Sales. The marketers are probably the hardest roles to hire for, because there's just a short explanation on that. There's a lot of salespeople that have high expectations of dollars, of pay, and they have little to no understanding of the sales process, or they come in with no experience and they're getting ignored. Helpful tip for that: hire for personality rather than relationships, because half the time they're not going to leverage their relationships for you anyway. And also understand that expectation of output has to be directly proportionate to their salary. Don't expect the same performance out of a $50,000 a year salesperson than you will out of a $100,000+ a year salesperson.